But welcome to our lunchtime presentation for the Integritas Institute of Bioethics here at UIC. We do these lunchtime seminars. We try to do them about once a month or so. We don't always hit every month during the school year, but we don't only hold them here at the College of Dentistry, but we do have them at other colleges, health sciences colleges here on campus. So look for those emails because we really do have some interesting topics that come up. So I am on the board of Integritas. That's why I'm up here introducing our esteemed speaker today. So you all know who I am, so I won't go there with that. But I'd like to introduce our speaker, Dr. David Ozar. It really is an honor to have him here. Those of you in the ethics class in D1 year, you know that you use his textbook, and others of you use his textbook here. And he has written the book on dental ethics, so it's really an honor to have him here. So I'll give you his bio. Dr. David Ozar is Professor Emeritus in the Department of Philosophy, Loyola University at Chicago, where he taught from 1972 to 2015 and was the Director and Co-Director of Graduate Studies in Healthcare Ethics from 1985 to 2010. He has also taught and lectured in Loyola School of Medicine, Nursing, Business, Law, Education, Social Work, and Dentistry, and served as Director of Loyola's Center for Ethics from 1993 to 2006. He earned his MA in Philosophy from Loyola in 1968 and his PhD in Philosophy from Yale in 1974. In addition to his work at Loyola, Dr. Ozar is in his 33rd year as Associate Member of the Professional Staff, member of the International Ethics Committee, and Consulting Ethicist for North Shore University Health Systems in Evanston. He also served on the Research Review Committee of the Chicago Department of Health from 1986 to 1993, as Consulting Ethicist for the Midwest Hospice and Palliative Care Center from 1989 to 1998, on the Ethics Board of the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, the Executive Committee of the Chicago Regional Advanced Care Planning Coalition, and as Adjunct Professor and Lecturer in Medical Ethics at Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine from 2007 to 2011. He was the founding president of the American Society for Dental Ethics and the coordinator of Organizational Ethics Affinity Group of the American Society for Bioethics and Humanities from 2004 to 2014. He was named an Honorary Fellow of the American College of Dentists in 2000 and an Honorary Fellow of the American College of Legal Medicine in 2015. Once described as the founder of dental ethics as an intellectual discipline, on October 25th, Dr. Ozar will receive the American College of Dentists Ethics and Professionalism Award for a lifetime of contributions to the understanding of professional ethics in healthcare, which is quite an honor. Dr. Ozar has published one book, as I mentioned earlier, Dental Ethics at the Chairside, now in its 3rd edition, and published more than 160 articles on topics in healthcare ethics and professional ethics in books and professional journals. So please join me in welcoming Dr. David Ozar to UIC today.
I didn't actually intend for them to read all that stuff. But what it probably proves most of all is that for most of you, I'm old enough to be your grandfather. And if you have good relations with your grandparents, that's a good start for me. And if you don't, well, listen and see if this is worth anything to you. There is a thing going on called the Unrepresented Patients Project for Illinois. And I'm going to try to tell you about it and where it is right now. You may encounter unrepresented patients in your dental care. If anybody here from the medical school or those faculties, you will almost certainly encounter unrepresented patients. In a hospital like UIC's hospital, there are lots of them, and they come fairly often. But first, some background. And I'm going to read this so that I actually get done in time for you to eat your pizza and do whatever you have to do next. We all wish that every patient who cannot make an important medical decision had provided us with an up-to-date advance directive and a properly executed durable power of attorney for health, so we would know who is the patient's legally authorized surrogate and ideally the surrogate is someone with whom the patient has had careful conversations regarding their hopes and fears during their hospital stay. A footnote, if you don't have a durable power of attorney for health completed, you should do it before the day ends. You never know what might happen. You might be someone who is not able to make decisions about yourself. But we all know that many of our non-decisional patients do not fit this description of having these documents and a legally authorized surrogate. We do the best we can with whatever information they have given us, and with the persons whom they or the Illinois Healthcare Surrogate Act has designated as their legally authorized surrogate, even if they haven't talked to them very much, which is true of most of us. If you have a surrogate and you haven't talked to them about it, you should. But in the worst case scenario, patients who are non-decisional and for whom important medical decisions need to be made do not have advance directive and have no one to serve as their legally authorized surrogate. In some of the literature, these patients are referred to, somewhat sadly, as unbefriended. In Illinois, as in most states, there's only one legally authorized way to resolve such situations. I should say, by the way, more often in the literature now, they're called unrepresented. In Illinois, as in most states, there is only one legally authorized way to resolve such situations, namely, that a judge appoints a guardian ad litem, who then works with the attending physician in making medical decisions for such a patient. But as the researcher Thaddeus Pope summarized in an article back in 2013 in the New England Journal of Medicine, this solution, this is a quote, is usually inadequate for several reasons. Most people don't know this, by the way. The judicial process is too slow and cumbersome relative to the need for important treatment decisions. It's expensive, you probably didn't know that, and guardians often lack time, given their heavy caseloads, to learn about the patient. That's the end of the quote. Cases involving unrepresented patients began to refer to the ethics committee I sit on at North Shore University Health System for ethics consultations a few years ago. We're up on the North Shore, we don't see as many of these sorts of patients. So down here where there are more homeless people, and anywhere where there are undocumented immigrants, and various other folks who just don't have anybody and have drifted through the cracks, there are lots more. We did a survey a few years ago of people who are part of this project I'm telling you about. And in some of those hospitals, they clicked the box that said, we get dozens. And they don't mean dozens per year. Our committee at North Shore University Health System realized that even if a hospital sought assistance from the probate courts, many important medical decisions, including the important initial decision of determining what the goals of care are, life extension, repair of things, what, would need to be made in the meantime, that is, before the judges and the guardians and so forth finally got their act together. It typically takes 3 to 4 weeks for them to get their act together. And of course, you can't stop treating the patient for 3 or 4 weeks while you wait for a guardian ad litem to be appointed, at least not if you're a conscientious healthcare provider. So our ethics committee decided to set up a task force, which I was asked to chair, to see if there might be a better solution. What our research found was that with very few exceptions, our situation at North Shore was typical in hospitals across the country. That is, very few hospitals have policies or guidelines to address these sorts of situations, and only a handful of state legislators have even noticed there are problems here. State legislators need to be involved eventually because they're being asked to change how the probate court system works, or something like that. Caring properly for unrepresented patients raises at least 3 important ethical issues that the current probate court guardian ad litem process does not resolve. Let me describe all 3 of them in a moment. But first, let me say the result of our task force's report within the hospital was that the hospital administration asked the ethics committee to take the lead in bringing together ethicists, ethics committee members, mission leaders, and so on from other institutions who are also concerned about these issues. And the hope is that we will eventually change hospital policies and, if necessary, Illinois law about how important medical decisions are to be made for unrepresented patients in Illinois hospitals. We began this process by contacting the clinical ethicists and ethics committee chairs, those are the sort of people I know in my professional role, whom we knew or could identify quickly within the Chicago area. That group had its first meeting in April 2017, and there were 35 people present and another 16 asking to be kept in the loop. This group already included representatives of 12 hospitals or hospital systems and 5 other organizations. At that meeting, the group strongly confirmed that the ethical issues we saw at North Shore were indeed typical of their institutions, and that some hospitals saw unrepresented patients in much larger numbers than we had experienced at North Shore. The group in April 17 also strongly agreed that the ethical issues involved in caring for unrepresented patients are serious enough that we should try to build a movement that would change how these patients are cared for here in Illinois. Most of the people in the movement think we should change how they're cared for nationally, but you've got to start, this isn't small, but we got to start with one state at a time, especially because we're talking about legislatures. Soon thereafter, the project required the name I've already mentioned, Unrepresented Patients Project for Illinois. Acronym is UPPI, which I'll repeat a number of times probably. A second meeting with an even larger group of concerned people took place in October of 2017, and the third meeting in April 20th of this year. This meeting was attended by telephone or by person by 49 people, and our contact list now numbers nearly 100 people representing 27 hospitals or systems and 14 other organizations, including a number of statewide organizations and hospitals and systems outside the Chicago area. So our first step was Chicago region, the next step was to start going statewide. We're getting there. The participants in the April 2018 meeting also agreed that a steering committee needed to be set up, for which I was very grateful since I'm not about to do all this myself. It currently numbers 7 members to make strategic decisions that will be needed about the changes we're aiming at. And also several members of the group who are lawyers, not the steering committee, but the larger group, have formed a legal subcommittee to research relevant laws and guide us in those aspects of the process. I'll tell you more about the process in a minute. First, I want to explain in more detail the 3 ethical issues that motivate this project. And I'm going to pause for a minute as new purchasers or eaters of pizza enter. And those of you who've come in since I started, let me fill you in for a second. My apologies to those who already heard this. The Unrepresented Patients Project for Illinois is an effort to change how important medical decisions are made for patients who are no longer capable of decision making, or at least aren't capable when they need it, and who have no advance directives and no durable power of attorney document, and who don't have anyone who could be a legally authorized surrogate. So they're literally sort of human beings about whom we usually know next to nothing, and they have no one to speak for them. That's the people whose health care we are concerned about in this project, and the phrase for them is unrepresented patients. So now I want to explain 3 ethical issues that have motivated the group I've been talking about to come together and to try to take action. And then I will talk to you a little bit about what our group envisions and hopes for, although admittedly we're at an early stage of all this, when we try to think of the ideal way for important medical decisions to be made for unrepresented patients in Illinois hospitals. In order to explain these things correctly, however, it's important for me to explain more precisely what we mean by an unrepresented patient and what we mean by an important medical decision. These are crucial concepts here. The working definitions I will quote in a minute are the current result of discussions by the attendees at our 3 meetings over now almost 2 years. And suggestions for fine-tuning them, however, keep coming in, and if you know of any, let us know. Feel free. So the current definition we're working with for an unrepresented patient is this. A patient is unrepresented who, first, is facing an important medical decision, second, is not capable of making an autonomous decision about this matter at the relevant time, and is unlikely to recover this capacity before the decision needs to be made. Footnote, many of these patients are unable to make decisions now and probably never will be. That's the case for many people of this description, but we want to be sure we include people who might be able later, but they can't make it now and they need it. because that's when they need a surrogate too. And who has no advance directive document or equivalent, and who lacks an identifiable substitute decision maker or legally authorized representative, and for whom, and this is in general true anyway, no other evidence from the patient's past or from other parties is available to support a reasonable conclusive judgment about what the patient would likely choose if they could. I could say more about that if you're interested in knowing how incapable patients are dealt with ethically. But the basic principle is we should try to do whatever they would choose if they were capable, if we can have any clues to figure that out. That's what surrogates are supposed to be for. That's what advance directive documents are supposed to be for. But the patients we're talking about here don't have any of that. And we don't know what they would choose. We often have no idea what their value systems would be, and so on. Regarding the patient's decision-making capacity, we're currently considering the usual ways of determining whether a patient is capable of autonomous decision-making to be sufficient. This sort of stuff is defined in the law and in practice pretty effectively, and so we're not going to try to change that unless it somehow, some reason turns out that we need to. We will need to say more about this later in terms of the language of Illinois statutes, etc., including, it turns out, mental health statutes and directives. And some people are incapable by reason of their mental health condition. That gets to complications I don't know much about yet. Similarly, we have not tried to define in detail the due diligence the hospital staff would have to exercise to determine if the patient might have a relative or a friend who's legally capable and willing to serve as a surrogate decision maker out there somewhere, or due diligence to determine if there is an appropriate advance directive document or other indications of what the patient would choose if capable. A footnote: one of the reasons the probate court process takes as long as it does is in the interest of there being a careful search for these things. Potential surrogates who are willing and capable, potential documents that might be somewhere, and so on. In actual practice in hospitals, social workers look for these things as soon as they can and as hard as they can. And by and large, I think our assumption will be that that's what will continue to happen and it will be enough. But my guess is that when we get to doing legislation, it may well be necessary to define due diligence in these regards in some way. But at the moment, at least, we're going to say we think ordinary practice and common sense are enough, and if that proves to be tricky enough, we'll deal with it. We take it for granted, of course, that the importance of important medical decisions that we're focusing on means that efforts to answer these questions are not sufficient if they don't significantly go on what's immediately obvious and readily available. I'll comment on another aspect of this definition in a minute. First, the working definition of important medical decisions. You might have thought this is self-evident, but in fact it's something that needs to be specified. Important medical decisions are all the decisions about medical treatments and other interventions, tests, etc., that are neither emergent, an important word, nor routine. With regard to emergent situations, the patient is presumed both ethically and legally to give implied consent for these. That is, these are the kinds of things that happen in an emergency room. When you go into an emergency room, if you've been there, you don't get asked to sign an informed consent document for what they're going to do. It's assumed that if you're in an emergency room, whether you came there yourself or you were brought there, you want people to take care of your emergent situation. And it's assumed because why else would you be there? And so anything that would be considered emergent, needing immediate attention medically to ordinarily save your life and stabilize you, which is what emergency rooms do. Those things would not be in the category we're calling important medical decisions because it's already assumed that the patient would want those, even if the patient is incapable of decision making, as many people in emergency rooms are. Routine medical interventions are those that don't require a formal act of consent because consent is taken to be implied, again implied, when the plan of treatment has already been determined and routine fulfillment of the plan of treatment is what routine fulfillment of the plan of treatment is what counts as routine medical treatments. So if you're in the hospital and part of the business is to take your temperature at 4 o'clock, they don't come in and say, by the way, do we have your permission to take your temperature at 4 o'clock? It's implied by the fact that you're there and the plan of treatment has been selected that routine fulfillment of that is going to happen. Same with medicines and so on. Most of the things that are routine in ordinary hospital care are covered there. Important medical decisions, though, will include decisions about medical treatments and interventions for which informed consent of either the patient or a legal surrogate is currently required, say an operation, as well as decisions in which the goals of care for a given patient are determined or changed, and or the plan of care in fulfillment of those goals is established or significantly changed. It may not have occurred to you, especially since most of you are young enough not to have been in hospitals very much, that somebody, someplace along the line, identifies when you are admitted what the goals of care are. Is the goal of care to keep you living forever? Is the goal of care to relieve your pain, period? Is the goal of care to restore your function? There's actually quite a long list of potential goals of care. And in most cases, when you've got a surrogate decision maker or a capable decision-making patient, the goals of care are either worked out explicitly and called that, or at least are worked out in contexts where it's obvious that's what we're talking about. Say you agree to go to the hospital to have your appendix out. Well, the goals of care have been identified, the main ones, namely, let's get your appendix out through a successful operation, recovery, control infections, keep you as pain-free as possible, get you home, blah, blah, blah. Well, with a patient who isn't decisional and doesn't have anybody to speak for them, who decides the goals of care? The physician, the attending physician. With what help? Whatever help he can find from she can find from the staff, but we don't know anything about this patient. That's one of the problems. So, note that the category of important medical decisions is not limited to decisions about instituting or ending life-sustaining treatments or other medical decisions at the end of life. This is a common mistake, is to assume all unrepresented patients are there because they need end-of-life treatment issues. Many other kinds of non-emergent and non-routine care belong in the category of important medical decisions, including initially determining or changing the goals of care, and from those goals of care, the plan of care for the patient, as well as, another thing that's often overlooked, decisions regarding discharge of unrepresented patients who no longer need care in a hospital. Who decides when a patient who is now stable enough to be discharged to a nursing home, say, an unrepresented patient who's not a capable decision maker, etc. Who decides when they should be discharged? Hospital staff. Taking account of what? Well, we don't know anything about the patient. With these working definitions in mind, here now are the three ethical issues the Unrepresented Patients Project for Illinois is hoping to address. And this is the heart of the message. This is why this is important. The first concerns the impact of current legal mechanisms in Illinois on the timing of important medical decisions. The second concerns issues of consistency and continuity in care for the patient. And the third concerns complexities of determining what's in the best interest of a person about whose life values we know nothing, or next to nothing. So now the first one. The timing issue is pretty obvious. Important medical decisions need to be made for unrepresented patients as soon as they are admitted to the hospital out of the emergency department. They almost always enter through the emergency department, but then the emergency department does what they're supposed to do and admits them to a regular bed in the hospital. So the goals of care now to be determined. In fact, most unrepresented patients are not even identified as unrepresented patients, if at all, until after their admission to some specific medical intervention requiring informed consent, formally, is recommended. In addition, even if a patient is identified as unrepresented and court-supervised guardianship is sought through the legal process that's around, that process involves significant delays during which, at a minimum, a determination of the goals and plan of care for the patient, and often many other important medical decisions need to be made. Now, in the real world, of course, any important medical decisions that need to be made for a patient already admitted to a bed in the hospital will be made. Namely, by the patient's attending physician. But they will typically be made without reference to the special circumstances of an unrepresented patient, no surrogate, no document, and so forth. Now, they know there's no surrogate and no document, but that should be telling us something about how these decisions should be made. And since nobody's thinking about this in actual practice very much, that doesn't happen. The current default situation for most unrepresented patients is that whoever happens to be the attending physician makes important medical decisions for the patient solo, because there's no appropriate person to partner with the physician, no surrogate, no document representing the patient in other ways. And this fact, the fact that these decisions are made by the attending physician solo, takes us to the second and third set of concerns. The second set of ethical concerns in the care of unrepresented patients concerns consistency and continuity in their care, and it raises serious questions about arbitrariness in how these important medical decisions are being made. For unrepresented patients are invariably cared for, you may not know this, but it's the case, by either residents or by hospitalists. That is, I suppose I should say a word about what a hospitalist is. 20 years ago, if you went into a hospital and you didn't have your own primary physician coming in to see you, you would be being cared for by residents. Because hospitals would hire enough residents to care for everybody that didn't have a primary physician to care for them, not to mention caring for them when the primary physician isn't actually there. Those residents worked immense hours, and it was decided not too long ago, maybe a decade or so, that this was not good for patients and probably not good for residents either. And now residents are not allowed to be asked to work for more than 80 hours a week. 80 hours a week? Yeah, 80 hours a week. That's the limit. Well, this meant that there were an awful lot of patients who had no residents in that hospital to care for them. So the hospitals have solved the problem by hiring physicians who rotate taking care of the patients who the residents can't be taking care of, or actually more often, in fact, taking care of all the patients who don't have primary physicians. And then the residents work with the hospitalists as part of their team and so forth. At any rate, whether it's resident or it's a hospitalist, all of these people rotate. And the hospitalists rotate every Sunday, at least in our hospital, and it's the same sort of thing, a week at a time. And so we have an arbitrariness issue. The kind of consistency in the values guiding important treatment decisions that might be available if the same physician were caring for a patient throughout the course of his or her hospital stay is typically not available to unrepresented patients. When a patient has an advance directive or there is a legally authorized surrogate available, these can provide a stable point of reference for a non-decisional patient's decision-making processes, even though you've got rotating attendants to relate to. And this is especially regard to the ethical aspects of the more important medical decisions. Would it be right for Sally to receive dialysis? Sally can't make decisions anymore, and Sally's sister is here, designated her legally authorized surrogate, and whether it's right that she receive dialysis in this situation or not, the attending and Sally's sister would work that out. That's how surrogates work. She might even have a document that says, under no circumstances do I want dialysis, in which case that would become relevant as a guideline for attending physicians, even though this week's attending physician will be different from last week's and next week's will be different from that. A side note, a little story. We did an ethics consult some time ago, and at the ethics consultation meeting, the attending who had been on the case the previous week came, as well as the attending who was on the case the current week. That's the first time I've ever seen that. And it was extremely helpful, because what it meant was that we had automatic continuity from rotating attending. That doesn't happen. If they're not on service, they're home. They're living their lives. They don't come in. That's why they go away, so they don't have to come in. So, admittedly, the mechanisms that we have, that is surrogate decision-making and advanced directive documents and that sort of thing, they don't always provide the kind of stability I've talked about, but they often do, and they could with a little more help sometimes, maybe from an ethics council. But unrepresented patients do not have surrogates and do not have documents to guide these things, so different rotating attendings can, and in fact, in our experience, do make very different decisions about the goals or plans of care for a given patient, and about other important medical decisions that might need to be made. It was, in fact, cases of that sort that brought this to the attention of our ethics committee. We had a patient who was non-decisional and had no surrogate and no documents, and attending A, hospitalist A, took care of him on week 1, and hospitalist B took care of him on week 2, and changed the plan of care, because she thought it should be different. You know, these aren't irresponsible decisions. These are conscientious decisions by conscientious physicians, but they weren't the same from week 1 to week 2. Nursing staff said, "What's going on?" and called for an ethics council. And that's how we started to realize that this arbitrariness problem is very real. And it's nobody's evil intentions that's making it real. It's just there. That's what happens with rotating attendings. The ethics consultations that first came, I said that. The reality of rotating hospitalists or residents thus deprives unrepresented patients of important components of continuity of care and can easily subject them to arbitrary changes and inconsistency in the values that guide their care. Now the third ethical issue, which reinforces the concerns of the second one about arbitrariness. This is a philosophic point in a lot of ways. It concerns the complexity of determining what is in the best interest of a patient about whose life values we know nothing or next to nothing. It seems clear, since we know nothing about what they would choose if they could, that the only thing we have to guide us in making important medical decisions for unrepresented patients is what's in their best interest. That makes perfect sense, and there's wide acceptance of that standard across the medical and medical ethics communities. But determining what's in the patient's best interest is almost always relevant to important treatment decisions that need to be made. And so, excuse me for a moment here, figuring out what we mean by best interest is crucial to all this. But if we can reasonably conclude that what a patient would choose in a particular situation, if she or she could, there's a lot of consensus that that's how we should take care of incapable decision makers who are our patients. But the patients we're talking about don't have this. So, what should we say about best interest? And I have to jump ahead here because I've already said something. Okay. When a patient or someone about whose values, etc., we know nothing to guide us, what would you think about calling these, it's my phrase for the moment, bare human values judgments? That is, judgments that are supposed to be based on what is valuable to a human, whoever he or she is. That's all we know about this patient, that he or she is human. Well, what should be valuable to a human, whoever he or she is? Here's a problem. It's pretty well known that adult humans do not all have the same view of what a human, whoever he or she is, considers valuable in life, or what constitutes a better quality of life. This fact points to a third ethical problem with the usual situation in which the attending physician makes important medical decisions solo, perhaps with personally chosen assistants, but solo, that is based on his or her particular values about whoever happens to be a human being. Even though physicians, like adults generally, do not all have the same view of what is valuable to a human, whoever he or she is, still it is the attending physician's personal view of what qualify as bare human values that will unavoidably guide that solo decision about the ethically best treatment for an unrepresented patient. But since the rotating attendings may have different views about this, and in fact do, that's the reason I was stressing arbitrariness. But behind the arbitrariness is the complexity of this notion of best interest and the fact that people don't agree. Now, we can't solve this by surveying the entire human race. And as far as I know, there are no philosophical answers to what is best for all humans, every human, that could guide us here. What we do in situations where we don't have this kind of guidance is we try to gather a number of people together to have a careful conversation about it. This is in fact what ethics committees do and ethics consultations are about. You get a number of heads together and get different points of view and try and sort it out and see if you can come to a consensus. With this in mind, all of these things in mind, I hope you will agree that these are serious matters and that a statewide initiative that aims to address them is justified. Let me describe to you what we have proposed and where we are right now. The participants in the Unrepresented Patients Project for Illinois are currently proposing that as soon as a patient is identified as unrepresentative, and that would be unrepresented, would have to happen fairly quickly if we can, the hospital will then authorize a 3-person committee, I stress 3 persons and I'll come back to it, that will partner with whoever the unrepresented patient's attending physician is at the time in making whatever important medical decisions are needed, including determining the goals of care and the plan of care for the patient. Moreover, with the issues of continuity and consistency in mind, this 3-person committee would continue in this role for this patient until the patient no longer needs hospital care, that is, the patient is either discharged or dies. This is one way of dealing with the rotating attendings having different views thing, is you have a group that represents the patient in some way, following them through their entire hospital course. The members of this 3-person committee would be specifically trained for this role, and there would be hospital or system policies in place to authorize and monitor the committee, assess its performance, and so forth. The reason for proposing that a committee of 3 persons perform this function rather than just one is to counter, as much as we practically can, the potential for arbitrariness about best interest judgments. At least we would have the doc and 3 other people rather than the doc alone. Trying to figure out what's best for somebody about whom we know nothing or next to nothing. The ideal makeup of this committee, we think, at this point, would be a physician, because of the medical issues involved, a social worker to take account of what social workers know about these situations, and an independent community member. All of them specifically trained for this function and ideally representing in the committee's makeup or experience in some way anything we might happen to know, if we know anything, about the religious, cultural, or ethnic characteristics of the unrepresented patient. Of course, it's easy to imagine situations in which achieving this ideal would be highly impractical, if not impossible. Smaller hospitals, for example, might need to collaborate in order to come anywhere close to having a 3-person committee that was available for these things. In many hospitals or hospital systems, experienced members of the ethics committee are likely to be called upon for this role because they will have already had some of the relevant experience. But our proposal specifically excludes assigning this position to the ethics committee because this 3-person committee is going to be partnering with the patient's attending physician, and this involves something much closer to making a collaborative decision with the physician than providing ethics education and advice, which is the ordinary role for an ethics committee, even in consultations. So far, our efforts to experiment together in our minds and work out the best ways to respond to these ethical issues in practice, and what we know about what's been done by a few hospitals around the country that have done something. Putting all this together is going to take time and the input of all the people who support the project. At least until changes are made in Illinois law or in the practice of Illinois probate judges, it's obvious that this 3-person committee would not be acting as a legally authorized surrogate. And that's why I have used the word partner to the attending physician rather than decision maker with in a strong sense. I can tell you that the state of Indiana passed legislation several years ago so that a hospital can seek emergency appointment by a probate judge of a trained volunteer to serve as an unrepresented patient's legally authorized surrogate. So the idea that we're aiming at to get Illinois to have a similar structure, hospital can appoint, etc., with a three-person committee, we do have an example of a place where it's happened as far as the legislation goes. My understanding, but this requires more research, is that there are some places in Indiana where this program is being used effectively, and there are other places where it's not, and I don't know why not. So we'll find out more as we go forward. Our hope is that Illinois law will be changed in a comparable way by authorizing the three-person committee I've described, rather than just one trained volunteer as in Indiana, to serve as the unrepresented patient's legally authorized surrogate. In the meantime, we'll probably have to find a name for the committee, maybe advocate or something like that. But in order to persuade Illinois legislators to make a change, the members of the project believe it would be important for a significant number of Illinois hospitals to first voluntarily establish such a process, or something like it, in that way to demonstrate by way of, in effect, a statewide pilot project, that this or some similar process is the best way for important medical decisions to be made for unrepresented patients. We have learned that a number of hospitals in California and elsewhere have voluntarily established processes, excuse me, similar to this, but we have not had time yet to fully research how these processes compare with what we envision and how well they're working. At its meeting last month, the UPPI Steering Committee formally committed the project to the strategy of going to the Illinois hospitals first before we go to the legislature and asking them to voluntarily adopt a process like this and to, in fact, conduct the statewide pilot. So that when we go to the Illinois legislators, we will be able to demonstrate that something like this not only needs to be established ethically, but actually works. And we hope the legislators will agree. I have to say, in closing, if this sounds like something that should have been done yesterday, we all agree. If it sounds like something that should happen tomorrow, we all agree. But we're talking about legislators and a long process. We're pretty sure that if we go to them just with an idea, very little is going to happen, or what might happen is what happened in Colorado, where a group like ours went to the legislature with an idea, something very much like ours, and the legislature did something different. And so this has to be done extremely carefully, and we're pretty sure that going to the hospitals first, even though there's many challenges in that, is going to be the best way to bring about the change that we hope will happen. So don't hold your breath, but on the other hand, I think it's a worthwhile project, and I'm happy to have a chance to share it with you. If by some chance any of you are in positions where you would be interested in being part of the process, let me know. I'll give you my card. You can email me and we can make you part of the group. But that's what I have to say, and I'll take questions and stuff if any of you have the energy to stay and ask questions.